good morning, everyone, depending on where you happen to be. I'm James Trotney. I'm COO at Points for Purpose and host for this event. We have a fantastic discussion for you today. We're going to talk about customer loyalty myth or business imperative, and how can you make customers fall in love with your brand and buy more from you in this noisy, hyper-competitive market. And not just for business, but for customer loyalty and attention. The competition is also in that area. How does one put purpose to profit in this digitally hyper-connected world where our customers are increasingly vocal and even cynical to some extent about what really matters most to them? So without further ado, I want to introduce four awesome guests that we are fortunate to have with us today. We have Chris Connor. Chris Connor from Franchise Marketing Systems. He knows everything there is to know about franchising and how to make it work, and he can probably expand on that if you want to get in touch with him after this webinar. We have Heidi Schoeneck, who's the co-founder of Grounded World, and she is a creative powerhouse who has worked with some of the coolest brands and products out there. And it will be interesting to have some of her perspectives on how brands react to loyalty in terms of projecting the image they want in the public. And then we have Steve Boczka, and I think I pronounced that right, Steve. I tried to get the Hungarian pronunciation. And he is a CEO of Pug Interactive and helps enterprise build strong brand customer relationships using online technologies that are relying a lot on gameplay principles. And so he has some insights there that I think will be interesting in terms of how do you keep customers engaged. And last but not least, we have George, and George is our franchise matchmaker. So he's Tinder for people looking for franchise business and for people who are looking for franchisees. And he has over 20 years of experience in this business. So we're going to have a little housekeeping. I'm sure some of you will have some questions. And if you have not already submitted some by email, because I know some of you have, we will take questions in the chat section, and we will try to answer as many questions as we have at the end of the discussion, and perhaps even beyond that, and reply to some of your questions by email. So before we begin, I would like to play a short video about Points for Purpose and who we are. We are a way to reward customers and make a positive impact. And so we'll be right back for our panel discussion. Don't go anywhere.
They call it the new normal. Millions of businesses are closing, and no one has been left untouched. Supporting economic recovery and building community are now more important than ever. Loyalty programs can make a real difference. Yet with over 3.8 billion loyalty memberships, people are active in less than half. At the same time, charities are struggling to source vital fundraising. There is a solution. Introducing Points for Purpose, the loyalty platform that gives back. By bringing brands, businesses, and charities together, customers can now shop, spend, earn, and donate their loyalty points to the charities they love, turning points into purpose and shoppers into donors. Points for Purpose engages customers, supports charities, and in doing so, does good in the world at the time we need this most. Points for Purpose, the loyalty platform that gives back.
And we are back. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to jump right in because I talked about Steve Boczka and gamification. So I want to start with him because I'm kind of a tech nerd myself. And I've been in the fintech space for quite some time. And I've heard about gamification in the fintech space, but I haven't really heard about it in the customer engagement space. So Steve, how does advanced engagement and gamification solve the biggest problems that companies are having out there in terms of engaging, communicating, and retaining actually some of their customers, getting their attention and getting them to interact with them?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So I guess we'd have to define first what some of the biggest problems are in the space. And I think when you look at the landscape of loyalty and engagement and the interaction between customers and brands, something that really steps forward, of course, is loyalty programs. Everyone's trying to retain the customers that they already have. The marketing function part, we figured that a long time ago, but how do you actually keep existing customers doing more and being more involved and engaged and orchestrating a relationship, I guess, that is lasting and very meaningful to both parties. And when you think about that, like loyalty programs today are very commoditized. The similarity between them is striking. Customers have cued into this. Like there's really very little that one program can do over another to make it stand out. I mean, I know personally, I've got probably 25 different apps on my phone, all for fast food. And if I want a Baconator today, it's because I want a Baconator today. It's because I don't want a Big Mac. And I'm going to go to Wendy's just because that's what I feel like having today. So there's the struggle to try to make the experiences differentiated. The experiences should also be personalized, which they're not. They're very kind of flat and bland. There's not enough feedback, I guess, to the end users or the customers that something about this relationship is special. So they're not seeing that. The feedback loop is not very well established or well defined. It's also kind of an isolating experience right now. The customer brand dynamic is about the individual and the brand. It's not as much about the community, the customer community. So that kind of narrowness, the narrow-mindedness, I guess, of the people running these programs is going to have a trickle-down effect to the actual customer who doesn't feel anything other than a sense of isolation, essentially. And there's ways to fix that. I mean, from my background, I can tell you that's absolutely true, that there's a way to get around that. And then just adaptability, like how does the program change over time, depending on where I am in my relationship with the brand? And I think the perspective that I feel like I'm able to bring, and I come about it pretty honestly, is one of a game designer, because that's really where I started over 20 years ago, being a game designer and a video game producer on some of the biggest budget blockbuster games that have been out there. For companies like Disney and Electronic Arts and Sega, Vivendi, Ubisoft. So some of the games that I worked on and led have grossed over $650 million. And what's interesting about that experience is that what we were doing was creating engagement for the sake of engagement. Engagement was the product, and we would package it and we would be able to put it on a shelf. People would actually give me money in order to experience engagement. So the direction of that relationship, I think, is quite unique in the marketing and loyalty world, that most people are looking at it like, how do I bribe my customers to do more? But really, there's a fulfillment. There's an intrinsic motivation that's available to tap into. And I think that's the perspective that's really sorely missing right now, is how do I orchestrate a relationship with the customer that is mutually satisfying and intrinsically engaging, in particular to the customer or the end user. And we've got all these things that are available to us from the video game world that we can apply to, combine with expected business outcomes. And I think that's where it gets really powerful. Sure, badges, points, leaderboards, we've all talked about that, but there are things that are much more powerful, much more, from the world of games, like collaboration, competition, customization, just the idea that certainly competition is one of them, but the idea of collaboration, the idea of higher purpose, the idea of skills mastery, strategy, all of these things are available, and they're very, very underutilized right now. What we find that when we're involved in projects, the unique perspective that we end up bringing is one that advocates on behalf of the customer fiercely, right? That side of the relationship is not really often considered very carefully, of what their wants and needs and preferences are, attitudes, beliefs, even in some cases. And what we endeavor to do is to say, hey, we're going to represent their voice at the table. Let's look at this from their perspective, not how you want to sell to somebody, but how they want to experience a relationship with the brand, and how you can take somebody from being unaffected and unaware of your brand, product, service, get them to experience it. Well, give them a call to action through marketing, which is necessary, get them to experience it, and then also have them become repeat customers, which is really relying on the back of the strength of the product or service. We have nothing to do with that. It's got to be good enough for them to actually participate. And then also have the next steps, which is once you become a good customer, you become advocates of that brand. And then highest and best use of that relationship is that I self-identify with the brand. So I would proudly say I'm a Starbucks drinker, I'm a Coca-Cola, I get the tattoo that says I drink Dr. Pepper. Not all industries are going to, no one's going to get a Prudential insurance tattoo, but there are certain brands and industries where it does lend itself to that. And there's a journey of how you can get people to that endpoint. And a lot of that is through engagement.
So that's a good point to transition here, because I heard that, you know, some programs are basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, kind of flatlining. People are not really thinking through the relationship with the customer. You mentioned bribed versus enticement, and I make a distinction between those two. What motivates somebody to do something on an emotional level versus purely on a financial level? So, you know, I'm thinking, you know, Chris, in your case, with regards to loyalty, what do you see with regards to customer engagement? And do you see that that's something that's really missing from the overall marketing program discussions that are taking place inside companies?
You know, so I guess just a little perspective, what I am spending my days doing is helping franchise new companies and helping a brand go to market as a new franchise. We are looking for any competitive advantage we can possibly find that would give us a differentiator, give us some value points to be able to convince a new franchise owner to come on board with that system, and help alleviate some of the anxiety that a franchise buyer has around investing in a new franchise system. A loyalty program is a great way to do that. Not only from the financial, economic side of it, but one of the things that caught me when Ivan and I connected here and we started talking about points for purpose is when you can associate the social side of it, the goodwill that comes with allowing people to donate to causes, to donate to a charity. There's huge benefits to that. We all know this. I mean, I think we've heard plenty about that and the growing trend of consumer behavior pushing towards it. What's cool about this platform, what caught me about it, was the fact that the customer, it's non-charity specific. You could donate to any cause you want, any platform you want, through the Point for Purpose platform. And that allows people it empowers the customer and not only creates the benefits that come with, or allows someone to leverage the benefits that come with social causes, but now they can choose which platforms they want to invest in, which charities they want to invest in. So from my perspective, in trying to create competitive advantages for a new franchise system, it's phenomenal, both economically and brand wise. I'd like to pick Steve's brain a little bit on this gamification thing, because I've heard the term so many times. It's like, I think I know what it means, but I think it would be good to hear some more about that too, Steve. But so I did a little bit of digging just on some of the platforms, some of the benefits to a good loyalty program. Bain came out with a statistic, said businesses that have a solid loyalty program are 88% more profitable than businesses that don't. Obviously, huge upticks in customer retention. When people lock in with a loyalty program, they come back. There's a higher frequency of return visits and customer engagement. The one that really caught me when I was looking this up, and it makes perfect sense, is as a brand, the more you get people in your customer loyalty program, the bigger, stronger, and more usable customer database you get, which is incredibly powerful. When again, I'm coming at this from a franchise standpoint, and we're trying to build value in scaling a network. The more customers we get in this database, the more people we get contacts with, We can leverage that now. We can push out promotions. We can communicate with them. And in any franchise system, we're trying to create a dynamic where the high tide raises all ships. And this is one of those ways that we can do that. We can show a franchise owner, by joining us, you benefit and gain by being a part of the system from doing this. And I think probably the best loyalty program out there, the sort of gold standard for it is Starbucks. Multiple billions and billions of dollars generated through that, and over 20 million active members. From my world in the franchise space, Domino's, I think, would probably be the appropriate example of Starbucks. They've absolutely dominated the loyalty program, and again, what it turns to is that the average unit volume now goes up because we're creating more connection with that customer. What we always are looking to do in what I'm always looking to do in a franchise presentation is help the franchise buyer understand how the revenue can be more consistent. It's always an easier presentation to get someone to invest when they can see that customer traffic is returning. You don't have to go out and hunt to get the next customer. Certainly all these loyalty programs that are positioned well and structured well will do that, and will show people how they can ultimately not be afraid of getting the next customer in the door.
So that's interesting, because you mentioned examples of earn and burn in the QSR in the QSR business, which is obviously quite prevalent in the franchise world. And as I was listening to you, I was also thinking, okay, so how many sandwiches, how many hot dogs or hamburgers can one earn, and how many points can you burn? And then going back to what Steve was saying in terms of engagement, it's not just about the free burgers. There has to be something more. How do you convince a retailer or a franchise operator to open up and look at things a little differently from the traditional earn and burn? I think there was somebody, I think maybe it was you, George, who mentioned you had 75,000 points with one QSR point. We calculated that was over
with
1,000.
Chick-fil-A. With Chick-fil-A, because
okay.
there's no particular reason to use them. They don't expire.
Okay, so yeah, I'd like you to comment on that, because it seems to be that there's an awful lot of accumulation of points that go unredeemed, and all sorts of programs, including the QSR business. Obviously, I don't know how many Chick-fil-A's you can.
So let's think for a moment about the original loyalty program, right? Like 40, 50 years ago, you'd go to a local restaurant, you'd see Bob or Susie or Betty, and every now and then Bob would buy you a cup of coffee, right? That's the original points program. Was you would go see your friend Bob, your kids played baseball with his kids. Every now and then Bob would buy you a cup of coffee, and you kept going to see Bob for coffee, right? And then at some point we came up with punch cards. And you'd get so many punches and you'd earn a cup of coffee or a donut or whatever it was. And so the market moved forward because Bob now had 5 restaurants, right? Or Susie had 10 retail stores. And so it got more complicated, that they said, well, gosh, if you come in on a regular basis, we need to give you a little something to keep you coming back, right? And so the punch card thing became a problem, because everybody loses their punch cards and you don't know where they are. And maybe you don't want whatever it is that they're giving away on the punch card. So punch cards fell out of favor for store cards, and now with the store card, you could earn points like the Chick-fil-A points, although that's an app now, not an actual card. But you would earn points, and they would accumulate, and it was up to you whether or not to use them. And operators like Starbucks have figured out how to get your eyeballs on that app, how to get those points in front of you on a regular basis. And you talk about gamification, Steve. Starbucks actually has games on a seasonal basis that you go in and play, and you can win prizes and all sorts of stuff. Starbucks does a brilliant job at keeping your eyes on their brand, not just in their rewards account, but on their brand. Starbucks will open stores that they don't expect you to walk into just so that you go to the store 5 miles down the road. I was having this conversation with a business owner the other day. So when you look at rewards programs, yes, Starbucks, absolutely a gold standard. They play the game well. They get you engaged. Their points expire. They keep your eyeballs on the app, and they keep you coming back. Right.
So how do they get how do they get you, keep you coming back? Because I mean, we talked about, you know, quote unquote bribery, free stuff, right?
It's partly the stuff, but it's also partly that they're front of mind, right?
Okay.
And so if you're thinking coffee, I was just going to say that Starbucks is fine coffee. It is not the best coffee or tea or anything else, but it's consistent and it's readily available. And when it comes to their loyalty program, it's easy. I don't have to go into the app and bring anything up and order anything and do anything complicated. I can pull up to the window, order my coffee, and say, can I use stars today? That's as complicated as it gets. Can I use stars today? I don't have to pull out a card. I don't have to pull out the app. I don't have to do anything, right? And so when you look at points for purpose, all I have to do is pay, and the points accumulate, and points go to charity, right? So that I think is particularly interesting about this program. And when you look at the way culture has moved, it's not just about getting some stuff. It's about doing good too, right? I want to buy my coffee and feel like I've done some good. I want to buy shoes from Tom's and know that somebody else is getting a pair of shoes. I want to buy socks from Bombas. I want to buy my vacuum cleaner from Bissell, right?
So that's good. Yeah, I remember you mentioning that. That's excellent. I remember you mentioning Bissell. Yeah.
I might get a savings when they have a sale or something, but I get the intrinsic reward that I've done something good. It's like paying it forward at Starbucks, which is a silly idea, but we can talk about in another webinar. But you know, when I do good, I feel better about my coffee, my shoes, my socks, my vacuum cleaner.
So that's a good segue, because as you're mentioning that, and you're mentioning Starbucks and feeling good about yourself, and I know Starbucks has been very front and center on all the ESG related, cause related, for good or for bad, depending on one's point of view. And so, Heidi, how do you see? Because you know, you look at brands and how they try to position themselves. As they try to position themselves, cause comes into play in terms of cause-related marketing. How does that impact the whole picture in terms of the consumer experience?
Yeah, and so James, you brought up cost as well. So I think that's a little different than what I was thinking about, but I think I want to hit that a little directly, because I think the first reframe I might suggest is we keep talking about cause marketing. And I actually would push brands, retailers, all of our partners to actually think about brand purpose instead of cause marketing. Cause marketing is typically seen as a nice to do from the CEO suite when he writes a check to a charitable organization after a profitable year. When you think about brand purpose, it's really what your business stands for and how you embed that and how your business makes money so that it's actually living to that mission. And then the purpose and the profit are fueling each other. So when you talk then about, you could say an ROI maybe around cause marketing, I would think about it through brand purpose. It's actually, how is that driving more loyal customers, better brand trust, et cetera. And then you can start to see the juice is worth the squeeze, as well as it starts to help your brand differentiate. So if you think about it, rather than a nice to do at the end of the year to make my stakeholders feel good about my business, or my employees feel good about the company they work for because I've written this great check, you actually embed it in everything your organization does and what they stand for. It actually can have a much bigger impact, not just on your company, but also in how people are relating to your company. So I might ask a question. I can't, because it's really hard to see. I'm speaking with 5 of my closest friends here on this call, but I don't know who's all in the ether listening around us. I know I've built up quite a fan base in Australia recently, so I'm curious if they're actually showing up to support. So I'd love to ask a question, if I might, to the chat, if that's right with you, James.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to ask them, what they believe. I'll actually put it in there. But what do customers actually, what do they consumers trust more? Businesses, government, and neither? Being an American, I might have a very strong opinion on that statement at the moment, but I'd be very curious if anyone else wants to chime in with an answer. And as I'm seeing
and so
flurry
yeah,
with
and
responses.
to our that would be interesting to find out, and you raised a valid point also, how do people feel about the statement you made, which is a brand purpose versus the rest, right? And that when you were raising that point, and I see we're starting to have a lot of questions of people answering here, who they
Yes.
trust or who they don't trust. And I was thinking of Patagonia. Patagonia made a revolutionary decision to be all about the brand's purpose. But not everybody necessarily has the courage to make such a decision. But I want to come back to some of the first aspects, which is, because I'm trying to see how to connect the dots, gamification, engagement. You're trying to get people to be more in tune, receptive to your messaging. So, that's one element. Cause, obviously, or purpose, marketing. In terms of projecting the brand image, and we heard about George and Chris, who were talking about various aspects of the P&L. You need the foot traffic, you need people coming through, you need the repeat business, and you keep to have people moving through, and in order to generate the profits, and to promote also your loyalty program in a way that people are going to want to redeem and are going to want to come back. And it comes back to choice, because I heard, it's not automatic. When we look at things from the point of purpose perspective, we want to give people choice. So when they earn, then they get to decide and how they want to redeem their points. They can.
Well, I think it works on several different points. So if I can, like, just going back to the chat for a second, because I think it maybe trust is one thing. So loyalty programs, cause, all can help generate trust. But then the other part is around engagement, which gamification absolutely does. The Starbucks example George was talking about for sure does. So then but then there's relevancy. And that gets back to the trust and the values and the things my brand stands for, and thereby proven out by which causes they support. So if I look back at the chat based on the question, which I think is really interesting, a lot of people saying neither, and some, I like the definitely not the government, might agree with that at the moment. But I think what was really an interesting study, the Edelman Trust Barometer said that people trust businesses more than they trust government. So actually it's not neither, it's businesses. So if we hold that truth to be self-evident, then we have a strong opportunity to really be trustworthy to our audience. So we know that 79% of Gen Z say it's more important than ever to trust the brands they buy. And that's more than any other generation surveyed. So one of the ways we earn trust is by standing for something. What's the great adage? You either stand for something or you'll fall for anything. So when businesses and brands can determine what their purpose is, what they stand for, then they can fulfill that purpose by how they look at embedding cause as the fulfillment mechanism, if you will, within their organization to live that purpose. And then that does a lot of things for that brand. It can help drive consumer loyalty. It can help set consumer expectations. And really, it can also help with differentiation. So what does Starbucks mean versus, I don't know, Pete's Coffee? Once you understand what that brand purpose is, you can buy into the brand rather than just buy it.
Yeah.
Well, and just to jump back in just really briefly, there's actually two levels that we're kind of talking about here, because one is the point of interaction, where I fully agree with you that when you give people choices and those choices have consequence, so especially interesting choices with consequence, and you add time pressure into that as well, that's where you can, in the moment, you can really create engagement. And that's what we do as game creators. We create interesting choices that have consequence, that often have time pressure associated with them. And then there's well, why am I even doing this? And I think that's where more recently I've been doing a lot of investigating, research, whatever you want to call it. And when you think about the brand customer experience as a relationship, so the friend dynamics today, if you look at like current research, like relationships really come down to things like trust and affection and shared narratives, honesty, camaraderie, boundaries. These are all dimensions of it, but there's also affinity. And affinity is where you have this like philosophical alignment about things. So what we're kind of talking about, even the points to perfect purpose context, is one aspect of the dynamics of a friend relationship that coincidentally carry over into the brand customer relationship. If the brand can be promoting values that a customer is in agreement with, then it feels now like a relationship, and now engagement is created, and you get this sense of, again, self-identification with the brand. It's like, oh, hey, we're rowing in the same direction.
That's a good point. And so I think we've sort of connected all of those dots in terms of how engagement fits with the way brands can communicate value. So it's not just gamification, but communication is communicating a set of values as well. And then I saw some comments in the chat about also people through the gamification element interested in sort of ranking status. You know, somebody mentioned elite, gold, medallion, et cetera. How do you combine all of those things and make sense of it? Because earlier I said, you know, we've got too many apps, too many cards, too many loyalty things. So how do we simplify all of that from a communication standpoint? Are there too many programs that are basically trying to tweak flatlining programs out there, and that are limiting the ways people can redeem, and is opening up those programs the solution? And I say that, you know, I have a vested interest in points for purpose, but it's a genuine question. How does the economics work? If I allow my people, my customers, to redeem outside of the store, how does that come into play?
Is that directed at me?
It's to everybody on the panel, because I think there's some element of communication in there, as well as purpose marketing, where I see some overlap in terms of, you want to project the value message that Heidi was talking about, but at the same time you want to project the what's in it for me. It has to be a win-win situation, so you have to feel good emotionally, but you have the whole ability to redeem, and you know, we say redemption equals retention. So if you can make it easier to redeem, and for people to redeem for things that matter to them more than what matters to the brand, does that negate the attachment, the emotional, the loyalty of people to that brand?
Well, so my view on it is that it's a pretty complex and sometimes chaotic dynamic, and different people have different emotional triggers and personal triggers and just wants and needs and expectations. Really, it is like a relationship. It is why that list of what eight or nine things that I gave as aspects of what helps define a relationship. You know, interpersonal human relationships are very complex, and we've been going back to Aristotle trying to categorize these in simple ways. So I think one of the things that have come up already in our discussion today is the idea of segmentation. And segmentation allows us to group people by those interests and preferences and wants and needs. And until you've done that, I mean, it's really, really hard to create engagement with anybody until you've put people into different buckets. And now you can deal with people in smaller groups, not one-to-one. That's very challenging, and not in a blanket way where we're doing one size fits all. It is something in between, and it's work. It's work to get there. You need data, you need insights, you need well-structured experiences that will reveal patterns of behavior and preferences. And really psychographics is really what it is. So yeah, I think until you've done that, it's really impossible to do it anymore. And there's so many different directions that it can go, in my opinion anyway.
You know, what do the other panelists? What are your thoughts
Well, I think
this,
when you look
opening
at
up loyalty.
reward programs, and I'll take the insider medallion, whatever category you want to call that. Nordstrom has done that for years, where if you have a Nordstrom points account or whatever they call their reward program, you not only get the points benefits, but you get early access to sales, you get early access to special events. My wife has a city card, and she bought concert tickets before they were available to the general public. And then you take the purpose side of it, and the one that surprised me that I saw, and I mentioned this to Heidi the other day, was American Express, who I don't think of as a card that particularly has a purpose behind it, because American Express may or may not have a purpose. It doesn't matter. Their members do. Their members all have their individual purposes. And so what I wasn't expecting was when I looked up, okay, so how much money have these card holders voluntarily given for their purpose? It's over $1 billion. Over $1 billion. They could have used those points on airlines or hotels or any number of things. They chose to give them to a charity that mattered to them. And so, I think when you look at the market, there are companies like Nordstrom that has the insider aspect, and American Express, and others that have the purpose aspect really nailed down. Starbucks has the, ease of use and gamification and all of that stuff, but there aren't many places that we see them all in one place. Right. And so that's I think a particularly evolution of the market.
So we've basically gone from having a bunch of loyalty cards or keychain tags to having a bunch of apps on our phone, is what you're saying. And there's no sort of a 360-degree view available today. So people dropping out of programs? Is that what's happening? Because I was reading an interesting statistic that some over 100, I think it was $150 billion worth of unredeemed loyalty points year over year go unused. Some of them remaining on balance sheets, which means it's a liability. So that's a whole other discussion in terms of OpEx and financial governance for the brands. But George, you mentioned American Express. Who else does it well? And are there examples of people who don't do it well, they can remain anonymous if
I think in terms of people using points for charity or for their purpose, not a lot that I can call on. There are companies that support purposes that they've chosen. I'd mentioned Bissell earlier. One of the founding family members of Bissell is very big into dog rescue and finding forever homes for shelter dogs. We as a family are an adoptive family for giant breed rescue dogs. So that purpose to us happens to sync. So there are people that will buy Bissell vacuums because it's a good vacuum and they got a good price on it, but they would have also bought a Dyson or a Hoover or something else. But then you have the people in that rescue supporting community who will only buy Bissell because it's the only brand that supports in a meaningful way rescue, right? And so, but that's not a points program, right? And there are other companies out there that have supported some pre-chosen purpose. And if I align with it, great. But if I don't, it really doesn't matter to me, right? I don't feel bad about it, but it's not necessarily my purpose, right? And so I think the ability that Amex rolled out, and there may be others out there, but was the ability to pick your purpose, right? We're coming into a retail and services culture where everybody wants everything customized, right? You're not getting the one size fits all burger from McDonald's. You're going to Five Guys to pick among all of the possible ones on the menu and build the burger that you want, not the McDonald's pre-formatted burger, right? And so I think when you look at how the market's changing, it's not just into that everything needs to be customized, it needs to be fit for me, but I want to pick my purpose too. Right. And so there's I think this evolution happening in the market of how do you make these loyalty programs relevant to the consumer, And if they're not, then it probably doesn't matter that you have one.
So it's really what you're saying. It's really about choice, giving people the choice on how what causes they want to contribute to, as opposed to somebody in a boardroom saying, this quarter or this year we're going to support whatever campaign, and it works or it doesn't work. It gets some degree of traction, but it's not necessarily, what you're saying is that it's not necessarily in tune with what I think Steve was mentioning earlier, sort of that more advanced segmented marketing of trying to find what makes people tick, what motivates them, what gets them up in the morning.
Well, I
It's
do
really
think,
hard to design a one-size-fits-all solution for anything.
yeah, and I was just
Yeah.
going to say, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope when you start to make it completely, let's say, on demand, meaning having the consumer drive all of that, because you just run a little bit of the risk of the company or the business or the brand really just being a bit unclear as to authentically what they stand for, what they do, what they support. So what the brand purpose does at least is gives you a bit of a lighthouse in order to help you curate what are those initiatives you want to be behind. Now, for American Express, for example, I think about helping small businesses and every business succeed, like giving them the tools or something like that in order to achieve their aspirations. So they have a very broad, a bit squishy, in my opinion, mission or purpose, but therefore it makes sense. Then these points should be redeemable for all the things that help people achieve that ambition. And frankly, all I can think about is Steve and his Baconator. So I'm trying to figure out what Wendy's is at the moment. But when you think about a brand and you can put the purpose light around it, it starts to illuminate what are those causes and what are those initiatives. And then you can invite the gamification, the customization in terms of how customers and consumers can engage with them. But I think it just becomes, it's just a bit of a watch out rather than trying to be all things to all people. Is how can you help curate a bit so that it's really clear for your consumers what the brand is, what it stands for, so that you can differentiate yourself in market and create relevant, authentic connections to your end consumer.
Yeah, and this is something that you point out that's very true, and I'll paraphrase a little bit what I think I heard, which is, don't give people too many choices because they won't know which one to make. Give them some choices that maybe speak to them, and give them the option to make another choice. Is that what you're really talking about? Because this is what we've experienced at Points for Purpose, that people don't want to be excluded from making a choice of their own, but they're open to suggestions based on whatever affinity they might have with that particular brand at that point and time in their life, and whatever values that brand is projecting at that point in their own life cycle as an enterprise. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't think directly, though I'm not, opposed to that position, but I think it's first know what your brand, your business is, your brand is, and what it stands for. And then within that ecosystem, be very clear with your audience, authentically who you are and what you do and what you believe in. And then you can open up the gamut in terms of what sorts of offerings you want to put underneath that for people to connect with you from a mutually aligned values position. So that's part of it. The other thing you mentioned, there is choice confusion for sure. I mean, heck, go to the grocery store and try to pick a body wash. But so it's helpful to help give consumers, I think Steve would probably be a master at this in terms of gamification, give them make it a little simpler in terms of how to engage and get them started on this engagement mechanic rather than overwhelming them with a world of choice. But if I use my body wash example one more time, when I go down that aisle of body wash and I'm overwhelmed with hundreds of SKUs, I do remember something about this Dove brand being for real beauty and real women and making me feel good about my own body. So it's possible that I'm going there going, but that brand I remember because of who they are and what they stand for. And that resonates with me. So I might pay $1 more for that bottle of body wash. So it works on both lenses. It's partly choice confusion that you're talking about. Your brand purpose allows you to help narrow some of that. And then the other part is just being clear and authentic as to who you are and what you stand for, so that consumers can buy into your brand and not just buy it.
So it's really a matter of hearts and minds coming together in order to gain that consumer wallet share. In a nutshell, I think that's what I'm hearing from the various participants in one way or another. Am I jumping the gun here, or is that what you all sense is happening?
I would throw one more stakeholder into the conversation, and that other stakeholder comes from mine and Chris's world, and that's the business owner, right? We're talking about big major brands, American Express, Starbucks, and Nordstrom's, and the rest. But when you think about franchise systems, those seem like really big companies, but that owner is a local owner, right? They own that store, they run that store, their kids play baseball with your kids, right? And so when you talk about how these big brands roll out these loyalty programs and what it means for them and how they operate them and how they work, now you've moved it to the local owner, right? And how does that local business, how do they draw traffic? How do they build loyalty? And how do they contribute to their communities? And so with an easy to operate program that engages consumers, you can bring them into that local store who's not a big savvy American Express. He's a local store operator. He's just a regular guy or woman or whatever. So that becomes a challenge of how do you benefit that local owner? And with the right program, not only does it give their consumers some benefit and draws them in and keeps them engaged in terms of being a customer, but if you could give them a purpose that's also local, right? As opposed to a major national or international charity, it doesn't have to be the Red Cross, right? It can be the Path Foundation, which is right down the street from us, which is a 501c3, right? And so with the right program, those consumers can shop local, can have local purpose, can engage their communities, and those business owners, those local franchise owners can help them do it.
I think this is a great point to take some questions. We have a little less than 15 minutes left. So if anybody among our attendees has some questions, or if we have some of the questions that were emailed in earlier, we can address those. I want to give people a little bit of time if they have a few seconds.
While people are posting their questions, George,
Yeah.
I definitely need that Bissell. I'm looking at my big hairy white dog, and I will be looking that up later.
Yeah, and I have a little dog, so I'm going to look into the suction power of those Bissell vacuum cleaners. But in any case, I think I'm waiting to see if we have any questions coming in. And otherwise, I'm going to start with some of the email questions. So if Steve, Steve Dart, can you put up the email questions we've received so far?
I can just imagine Steve furiously searching his email at the moment.
Furiously searching his email. So somebody said, I'll put on my charity hat for this one. I'd suggest people to make a choice of charity prior to buying something instead of making a choice after they buy. So that's an interesting comment. So does that mean that consumers should do their homework? I assume that's probably what that particular comment was about.
I'm trying to imagine how that would work within like a purchase journey. So I'm just thinking about, like, we worked with Tree Free greetings cards, and they donate $1 to cause at the back of every purchase. So it's obviously on the back end. You can go and decide which charity you want your purchase to go to. But then I'm almost imagining seeing items organized by, these go to whatever food pantries locally, these go to pets, and these go, and then you're deciding what you're purchasing based on which charity it goes to. it's kind of flipping the purchase journey in my head versus the point of sale machine where you're picking at the end. So I'm not quite sure how to make that happen. But it's an interesting thought, is to choosing based on the charity rather than choosing and then deciding the charity.
So Heidi, now that you're mentioning that, is it practically, because that was one of the questions we've got in our emails, and I think it's pertinent here, which is it practically possible to match customers with their own personal cause-related goal, preference?
Well, it's obvious. It's easy. I mean, you can align with a purpose and values and mission. So from that perspective, of course, and then you just have to take Pampers as the 1-for-1 vaccine thing, right? And so you absolutely can do that and help use that impact to help drive and close at purchase. What I can't reconcile in my head is how to make the choice of the charity drive putting that decision tree earlier up in the funnel. That feels a little trickier for me. I guess I've seen it from a voting mechanic. I think I've seen it either with, I think, Oreo, where it was choosing which Oreos you bought was then a determiner of which organization was either a voting, which flavor won or didn't win within a competition. It wasn't a charitable component. So you could maybe do it across a line of SKUs like that. But anyway, it's a tricky way to think about it. It's much easier to do it as an unlock. Here's my reward, and then open up the funnel in the back end, then choose where you want your reward to go, who you want it to benefit, like Points for Purpose does, rather than trying to put that at the front of the funnel. It's much harder.
Yeah.
To tie into that really quickly, Heidi, just really quickly, they ran an experiment at Starbucks years ago, and they still run it on a pretty regular basis of, you vote. They put out 2 tip jars. In whichever tip jar you drop your money in is the vote that you make. The funny thing that they found was that it increased the tips 3 times.
Yeah.
So if you look at this purpose that you're donating to as a vote, and that you've got multiple vote options, the purpose that you drop your money into, you want that one to win. So maybe it's actually even delivering more money to the purpose.
Yeah.
So that
Great
makes me think
example.
of a point there that really is more, maybe Steve can answer that, which is how do you know through the gamification, all of that stuff, whether you've won? You've won the customer's heart and mind? Is there a way of measuring that?
Well, that's actually a really good question. So you'd have to try to do it objectively, I would say. You want the truth, and the truth usually comes down to numbers. So if there's a methodology that you can use, we actually have one that we created. There's a formula that I call Steve's Net Engagement Score that does use what I was saying before, which is essentially measuring the number of interesting choices scaled with the consequence of those choices and the time pressure that may or may not be available. And there's a formula for calculating it. So you can actually get it to a number. And then you can use the engagement actions within the system and map them to outcomes. So it's a very powerful model. If you can see how engagement increases, does it increase sales, does it increase attention, calls to action, whatever you want, but you have to have a methodology first. So that's been our contribution, I think, to the state of the art of the knowledge, is trying to make it formulaic about how you can measure engagement. Yeah, that's how we do it. And I am going to apologize in advance because we're coming up close on the top of the hour.
Yes, we are coming up, and I was looking at our time, and as you were speaking, I was thinking about what George said and what you were saying, and George talking about the tip psychological experiment, which is kind of interesting. So do you think customers, and this is for George and for everybody, customers are they chasing for more than just the lowest prices? There's something more necessary to gain loyalty. It's not just price.
I think everybody's got their own equation. Every consumer has their own equation, right? But I think in terms of getting points to save money on something, I think a lot of consumers would fall into the category of just put it on sale, right? So there has to be a little more there to these programs, whether it's gamification, whether it's purpose, whether it's, some consumers are going to want the free cup of coffee every now and then. But I think having more than a one size fits all program option is a benefit.
Well, I think this is a good place to stop, and I want to sort of recap some of the things I heard about. First of all, cause marketing is a bad word. I wrote that down. It's purpose. What's your purpose? And I think that's a very good point, because picking the cause is one thing. Aligning yourself with the purpose is a different thing. I think I also heard that giving people some degree of choice and options as well, so that they're not overwhelmed by the number of choices they have to make. So some kind of guidance, and that in the end, the other thing I heard is there is no such thing as a one-to-one marketing. You really have to do more intelligent, segmented marketing, because people tend to react more through not just individual affinity, but community association. What community they associate with. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else that I missed?
Keep it easy. It has to be easy, whatever it is.
It has to be easy. So keep it simple, stupid, and idiot resistant for people to basically want to use it, is what you're saying. I guess this is a great place to stop. I want to thank everybody. And if you have any more questions, you can always send them via email. We'll be happy to answer any of those questions. And please feel free to get in touch with any of our guests today. I want to thank you all for your insights and contributions to our conversation. Thank you, and have a good rest of the day for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.